there are two things you don't mess with when it comes to the United States. One, the boats. Two, the oil. Something a fella by the name of Saddam Hussein figured out in 1991. Most of the issues that led to the Gulf War arose during the Iran-Iraq War, where Iraq, under Saddam's leadership and a hefty amount of US supplied weapons, had the goal of keeping elements of the Islamic Revolution out of Iraq. Elements that Saddam believed would rally Iraq's majority Shia population against Saddam's minority Sunni Ba'athist government, which was also officially secular. What followed was a horrific crossover between World War I tactics, so trenches, barbed wire, bayonet charges, mass artillery, and everyone's favorite, chemical weapons, and late 20th century technology, modern tanks and other armor, jets, modern small arms, and plenty of war crimes on both sides. At the end of the war, some 1 to 2 million were dead, and nothing had changed. That's right, this massive, horrific World War I-esque war, chemical weapons and all, changed almost nothing between Iran and Iraq. However, one thing it did do was burn money. In order to fund Iraq's war effort, Saddam had borrowed billions, primarily from Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. So after 7 years of war with Iran, all Saddam had to show for it was tens of billions of dollars in debt to Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Kuwait being a nation that Iraq already wasn't on the best of terms with. Iraq and Kuwait already had tensions due to a border dispute dating back to the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Iraq argued that since Kuwait was officially part of the Basra province of the Ottoman Empire, that made Kuwait Iraqi land. Kuwait argues that since the area was under control of the British Empire as a protectorate and the British drew the border between Iraq and Kuwait, as such, well, them's the borders. In years more recent to the Gulf War, Kuwait was also overproducing when it came to its OPEC quota. At this time, OPEC was aiming for $18 a barrel. God, I wish. But Kuwait and the UAE were overproducing to the point where the price would fall down to a mere $10 a barrel. $10 a barrel. Kuwait's overproduction caused Iraq to lose around $7 billion a year. Iran began to feel more and more isolated by his own Arab brothers who he thought were doing America's bidding. With talks failing to ease tensions, Saddam moved 30,000 troops to the Iraqi border with Kuwait. Saddam launched a full-scale invasion of Kuwait on August 2, 1990. Kuwait's military, consisting of under 20,000 men, many of whom were on leave when the invasion commenced, was unable to halt the Iraqi invasion. Saddam controlled the fourth largest military in the world at the time, consisting of almost 1 million men, 5,000 tanks, and almost 500 combat aircraft. Because of this huge disparity, Saddam conquered most of Kuwait, including the capital, Kuwait City, very creative name, in under 12 hours. Invading Kuwait put Saddam on Saudi Arabia's border, with whom Saddam had more than a few issues with in regards to debts that he owed to the Saudis. Saddam also now controlled Kuwait's oil fields and reserves, adding to Iraq's own large oil supply. Saudi Arabia, like Kuwait, did not have the military might to repel Saddam's army if he wished to invade. If Saddam did choose to invade Saudi Arabia, he would have control over a majority of the world's current oil supply. And the United States can't have that now, can it? With Saddam annexing Kuwait and moving troops and armor to the border with Saudi Arabia, the originally defensive U.S. mission to Saudi Arabia, Operation Desert Shield, was about to turn into the offensive Operation Desert Storm. and the US Navy had just the pair of ships for the occasion. The Iowa-class battleships, the Missouri and the Wisconsin, three-time champions, seen successful service in World War II, Korea, and the Cold War, were sent in to serve as naval gunfire support for the invasion of Kuwait. The now 50-year-old battleships were originally reactivated in order to counter the Soviet Kirov-class battlecruisers in the 1980s, during which they received major upgrades to their arsenals, including the ability to launch Tomahawk missiles, Sea-Whiz defense systems, and modern radar, among many other updates. But what hadn't been replaced were their main battery guns, 9 16-inch guns and 3 turrets, capable of firing a 2,700-pound shell, essentially a Toyota Corolla full of explosives, up to 27 miles away. Guns the Navy intended to use to great effect in the counter-invasion of Kuwait. Not only were the massive guns intended to be used to destroy Iraqi positions, they would also provide a psychological effect, shock and awe. While the phrase wouldn't be coined until 1996, the idea of using massive displays of force to demoralize an enemy was very much a thing before then, especially for the United States. Missouri and Wisconsin began their bombardment of Iraqi forces on January 19th, targeting an Iraqi command and control center that had been set up near the Saudi Arabian border with Kuwait. It would be the first time that the battleships had fired their guns in anger since the Korean War. The pair of battleships spent the next couple of weeks traveling along the Kuwaiti coast, targeting Iraqi defenses and artillery positions. While Iraq did have a large army, they didn't really have much of a navy, let alone one that could go toe-to-toe with an Iowa-class battleship. Let alone 2 of them. So the sisters were pretty much unopposed at sea, except for the stray silkworm missile occasionally.
Missile inbound. Shot! Brace for shock! Missile inbound! Starboard side!
Missile inbound. Starboard side. Brace for shock.
Brace for shock. Brace for shock.
Control, CC, do you have the missile visibility? I'm not looking for it.
So while the Missouri and Wisconsin were enjoying their Persian Gulf cruise, the coalition forces were planning the invasion of Kuwait. It was on the eve of this invasion that the sisters were sent to Faylaka Island, which would be used in the amphibious invasion of Kuwait. On the night of February 23rd, Wisconsin and Missouri began shelling Iraqi positions on the island, to absolutely devastating effect, completely obliterating the Iraqi positions. During these bombardments, Missouri and Wisconsin would alternate firing on the Iraqis. Basically, they would take turns. Missouri would do her bombardment, then Wisconsin, and again, a little bit back and forth. Sharing is caring, right? During one of these transitions, Wisconsin launched her RQ-2 Pioneer UAV. The UAVs had been added to the Iowa's tool chest in the late 1980s. With the drones, the Iowas could fire from beyond the horizon, outside of visual range of the target they were shelling. The Pioneers were basically very large radio-controlled planes with cameras strapped to them so the crews could see where these shells were landing on target, and then make adjustments accordingly. As Wisconsin was coming up to bat, Wisconsin's Pioneer drone was launched, it approached the island, and the pilot of the drone flew much lower than normal, so that the Iraqis would be sure to hear the engine on the RQ-2, which is literally just a lawnmower engine with a propeller strapped to it. Nevertheless, it makes a very distinctive sound. A sound the Iraqis had been hearing all night, moments before having a Toyota Corolla's worth of high explosives lobbed at them from almost 30 miles away. So keep in mind here, fellas, we're talking over the horizon. The Iraqis couldn't even see the Missouri or the Wisconsin as they were firing at them, and it's not like you have a fighter jet or a bomber flying overhead that you can see or hear. You just blow up. The only indication they had that they were about to be fired upon was when these Pioneer drones would fly overhead and they would hear the very distinctive sound that their engines produced. So rather than go through another round of shelling, the remaining Iraqis on the island assembled outside and surrendered to the Pioneer drone as it flew above them. A very wise choice. Also, a historical one. This is the first time in history that an enemy combatant has surrendered to a robot. So, yeah, pretty neat. So that means the amphibious invasion went well, right? Oh, you see, that never happened. The Missouri and Wisconsin were merely a distraction for Saddam, because surely you would use two of your most powerful and well-suited ships to support an amphibious invasion in an amphibious invasion, right? Just like they had been historically used throughout history, right? Well, that's exactly what the coalition forces wanted Saddam to believe. The whole show on Faylaka Island was a distraction, because the very next day, coalition forces launched a massive ground invasion of Kuwait instead, steamrolling over Saddam's forces in the process. Wisconsin and Missouri went on to successfully deliver over 1 million pounds of ordnance and support fire missions throughout the remainder of the Gulf War, using their missiles once their guns were out of range. With Wisconsin being the last to fire her guns in the Gulf War before the Iraqi surrender, she was also the last battleship to ever fire her guns during wartime in history, ending the final chapter in the history books for the Battleship. After some debate on what to do with the Iowas, Wisconsin and Missouri were finally allowed to serve as museum ships, with Wisconsin being in Norfolk, Virginia today, and Missouri in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And with that ends the last hurrah of the Iowa-class battleships. Thankfully, they are all 4 preserved today for us to enjoy. Speaking of enjoyment, hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this style of video, let me know by leaving a comment down below and subscribing to the channel. Make sure you hit the bell icon and all that jazz. Hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday, wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.